I'm so happy today. I have two special guests, two very special female entrepreneurs, and they are the founders of Habbi Habbi. They really bring language learning accessible into your home, and you can learn Mandarin Chinese, Spanish at home with Habbi Habbi books. And welcome. Well, who do we have here? Today we have Anne-Louise Nieto and Hannah Cho. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, just saying happy, happy makes me happy, happy. So I know you both are really good friends, and then you started this business together. How did you meet each other?
We met actually a long time ago now. We actually were both consultants right after school, right after college. And we were staffed on different projects in the middle of Minneapolis in the wintertime. So it was a good bonding experience then. But our friendship really grew when we lived in Shanghai together back in 2008, 2007, 2008. And we were both working in Shanghai and living there with friends. And it's how we really got to solidify our friendship.
When you were there, I'm curious, Hannah and Louise, were you both familiar with the Chinese language when you relocated to China?
So I grew up, my parents are Taiwanese, and I grew up learning Mandarin or hearing Mandarin and also going to, like so many ABCs, going to Chinese school on Saturdays. But I think that it was actually through college, and I met a bunch of Singaporeans and Southeast Asian and international students from Hong Kong and things like that, where they felt truly, truly bilingual. Like there's a difference when you hear home speak at home, like 我要去洗澡 or, 吃个饭, something like that. But when you really feel like, that was the first time I felt like, wow, these people are so bicultural. And that's when I started really having a personal, beyond family, personal interest in learning Chinese. And so and Anne-Louise can speak to why she also went to Shanghai. We actually went there independently.
Independently,
so, yeah. She was in New York and I was in the San Francisco office. And I remember saying, like, I grew up in the Bay Area. I went to school in the Bay Area. I really need to get out and I really want to go work somewhere different. And by work different, I want to go to a different country. So I want to go work in the China office. And Anne-Louise, can speak to why she, wanted to be in Shanghai, but we ended up there together randomly and independently. And that's how we got to know each other.
Totally. It was such luck. It was fortuitous. I did not speak any Chinese. And but my interest had started in college. I was a politics major, politics and economics major. And I wrote my senior thesis about China and India. And I really wanted to get to Asia, work in Asia, and had the opportunity that we worked for BCG, and it was great. We had to kind of find our way there and make our own paths there at the time. But I wanted to find an opportunity and was able to go over and live there for the year and work there, which sort of, it started academically in college, and then it became this really practical thing of wanting to be on the ground. And because I didn't speak any Chinese, my company, Adidas, offered some lessons. So I took some lessons. I was not the best Chinese student because I think I really struggled with the tones. And now, like, I watch my son just repeat our books and like get the tones, and I'm like, oh, I'm so jealous. But I did learn survival Chinese, so I could get around in a taxi or at the fabric market or at a restaurant, or I could like find my way home.
Well, I think those are great stories to see how we learn the language and the environment, how the environment can impact us and lead us away to be curious about the language. And it's so interesting, Hannah, when you talk about the Chinese school. I'm familiar with that, and then I remember all my cousins have to go through all that. Oh, was it fun for you? What was your kind of memory of the Chinese school? you know,
Mhm,
at
mhm.
that time?
So I feel like I had a very typical experience. And so I have very strong opinions about Chinese school now. But not to say that they're right. Obviously, everyone has their own opinion. But my experience was that I went every Saturday morning. So it's not necessarily the thing that you want to do on Saturday morning. I always did my homework on Friday night. With my parents who, did, obviously basically helped me through the homework. And I spoke to all my friends in Chinese school in English. So I didn't, actually, I kind of crammed enough, words in my head in order to pass the test for that day. So relying on a lot of short-term memory. And I do think there were some good things. For example, I did Malbits, the calligraphy as some extra supplemental classes, which is cool to say like, oh, I can do a little bit of calligraphy. It's not very good, but I know how to write it. Um, but I do think that I wish that it wasn't forced. And I so believe that so many things for children's learning, at least from my own experience, need to come like from within. And of course, like there needs to be some amount of parents like encouragement so we don't just drop out immediately. But I don't think that when I was young, I had the practical application of why I was going to Chinese school, except that I was just supposed to go. And I know so many people who are in Chinese school who don't speak Chinese, who probably only until they have kids now think, oh my gosh, I wish I learned Chinese better, right? Because now they think of a practical application. So I think like if my kids suddenly said, I want to go to Chinese school, obviously I would be very supportive. And there are some immersion programs that I think are very interesting. But I think Chinese school for the sake of Chinese school by itself, kind of just like memorization for is sometimes hard. I would try to find a different way to at least make sure they really want to do it.
So now you have Habbi Habbi with all the books, and I think this is a great story. And for Anne-Louise, how about you? Were you growing up with a different language, or you talk about you learned some Chinese when you were in China?
Yeah.
That was very practical. I thought that was quite amazing because there is a need, so
Right.
you want to learn.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I mean, and I'll come back to it because I grew up learning French in school, and then I actually worked in Paris and, spoke there. So again, a practical need, but with Chinese, it was all about practicality and getting around and doing things with my friends and wanting to be able to, take the subway and be able to say, excuse me, or, so that was a really highly practical and much less academic, path. And yeah, I was first exposed to Spanish in grade 1. I was lucky enough to go to a school that started it, pretty early, and switched to French in grade 4, and then I continued French all the way through college. I did a minor in it through college, and again, my college had a program in France, so I was able to get a job at a PR firm in Paris, which like sounds so glamorous. I mean, I was just, I was actually helping do a lot of translation between English and French as my job. But that was wonderful because the immersion experience really got me to the fluency. I like got over to that level where you start like dreaming in French, or you start, you start thinking in, the other language versus just being like, what is the word for, and so like Hannah talks about, just having that like intrinsic desire or passion for the language was wonderful and really propelled me, I think, to some fluency in French. I've since lost a lot of it, and I need to like. I feel like when I'm there, when I hear it, I get it back. But now I'm actually doing some Spanish. So my husband is Latino by heritage, or at least half, and studied Spanish in school and studied abroad, and so speaks a little bit of Spanish. And we wanted our kids to learn, and so they go to a Spanish immersion preschool. So I am trying to learn some Spanish along with them, and the books have been incredibly helpful for me, especially with being able to hear the accent. In the beginning, I really struggled a lot trying to speak French when I was supposed to be speaking Spanish, or trying to pronounce something in a French way versus Spanish. And now over time, I'm listening and absorbing, learning with them.
Yeah, so this is really interesting. So your own language learning experience of when you were younger, and now you have your own kids, and Annalise, you talk about how your kids, were, they are able to pick up the tones, Chinese or the Spanish, the accent. So now, what's the language, family language, kind of combination when you all of you together as a family? What languages do you use on a daily basis?
So for us, we are an English, speaking household, but we try to bring Spanish in and incorporate it in ways that are, I would say, like approachable and practical for us. So for example, like around mealtime, we'll try to use the Spanish words. So it's like leche, not milk, or agua. My little one, he says más instead of more, and he wants something to eat, and so, and in other things too, whether, maybe we're getting dressed, or maybe we're using the names of objects around the house. So we try to incorporate it. But again, we are still predominantly English. It's interesting. We were just spending some time with my parents this summer, and even like my mom, who speaks no Spanish at all, was trying, because I think she heard me using a lot of Spanish with the kids. And so she'd even try, she'd be like, okay, what's the Spanish word for this? And trying to like bring it in and incorporate it in. So little by little, and just trying to be really practical. The books obviously help so much. And then, trying to apply it in different ways.
And that actually was one of the things that actually was really important to us, because I feel like in the US, unless you come from a heritage family where, let's say, your parents or your grandparents speak a language, there's a lot of times it feels like language learning. I mean, this is changing, but before, language learning seemed to be like a high school foreign language requirement kind of thing, versus something where, like in other countries, whether it's Singapore or in Europe, language learning is so intrinsic, and people know that should start young, because when you're young, you can absorb tones and you're like a sponge, and so much easier when you're younger. And so one of the things we wanted to do with Habbi Habbi was just to make sure that Anne-Louise and I are such perfect examples of this. Like, whether you are a heritage family that has some exposure from, grandparents or something like that, or whether you are a non-native family that is just like, I really, whether it's for exposure, for global citizenship, or for interest, or for whatever it is, you're interested in learning another language. Habbi Habbi makes it accessible, because so many times language is about hearing, and if as parents we get intimidated if we don't know how to pronounce it. And so hopefully through Habbi Habbi, it's a non-screen way that people can introduce language early.
Totally. I think you just mentioned something very interesting about accessibility. I think that's one thing is so important, because we talk about, kids are like sponges, but you have to fill them with that environment, the language environment, so they can be the sponge of absorb. And it's a day-to-day thing. And Louise, I love your story about your mother, would join in and say, hey, how do you say that in Spanish? And then I think that is very encouraging for kids to see that, ooh, grandma is also speaking the language, the target language. So that is just really beautiful. So for the accessibility, for what Habbi Habbi has bringing to the the like almost like a global library, let me say that, because I have everybody can see this right here. I think what to go deeper a little bit later, but at the same time, it's like you are setting up a library for the kids, so it's accessible for the families, no matter they are native speaker of Mandarin Chinese or Spanish for now, because I am hoping more languages will roll out. So I think it's really, really special for the families can have the opportunity to explore the language and go deeper with the language, not just the words, but it's not intimidating because it's kind of fun. So how about you, Hannah, how about your family language combination right now in your own household now, because you also have kids?
Yeah, so as a little bit of context, in addition to after 2007, 2008, Anne-Louise and I were in Shanghai, and then we came back to the US for business school. And then after business school, I still said, because I still came back to the Bay Area for business school, and I said, oh, I will live my entire life in the Bay Area if I don't leave now. So then I left again after business school and I went back to China and I lived there for 7 years, actually, until my first daughter was born. And then we decided to move back to the US for family reasons. But so, you know, being in Asia, actually, I was like, oh, she needs to become better than me. My Chinese is proficient. It is fluent-ish. It just depends on what your standard is, right? And but so right now, when she was young, my husband and I would speak to her in only Mandarin. But that's, of course, as they grow older, increasingly harder because their expressions are harder, right? And you just like start throwing in words, right? That are English. So I would say that we are a predominantly Mandarin household at home, although of course, because our first language is, or our primary language is English, it's still easier for us to speak in English. And now that she comes home from school, she still speaks a lot of English, but especially when the grandparents are around, we still try to speak more Mandarin. And to your whole point about exposure, like the sponge, yeah, they are a sponge and you have to give them the environment. So knowing that sometimes we speak more English now, I try to supplement it with like, you know, if she's listening to a story going to bed, it's in Mandarin. If she's watching Netflix in Chinese, Netflix on TV, it's Mandarin. So it's mostly Mandarin. And it's interesting because, of course, within Chinese, there's so many dialects, right? But my mom speaks Taiwanese, my dad speaks Hakka. Together, obviously, they speak Mandarin. My husband's family speaks Cantonese and Shanghainese, and so obviously together Mandarin. And I remember having a very explicit discussion with everybody when my daughter was born, saying that it's not that it would be great to expose them to all like 5 dialects, right? Because that would be great, but realistically, because exposure time is limited, and there's already so little opportunity for exposure, I had a very explicit discussion that was like, if we talk to her, can we make sure to use Mandarin and not Shanghainese just because, or Taiwanese or Hakka, because I just want to make sure she has as much opportunity as possible to absorb Mandarin. So that's a long answer to basically we're a Mandarin English household.
Well, this is actually a great story because my kids, they don't speak Taiwanese, and I grew up in Taiwan. And every time we go back to Taiwan, they will hear Taiwanese a lot of times, you know, in the open market. And now they're a little bit older. Actually, they are very interested to, they listen to something and they will copy and they'll say, does this mean this? And it's kind of like, you know, when you go to Hong Kong, if you speak some Mandarin, you go to Hong Kong for a few days, you start to like, I think I know this language. So a lot of things are connected. So you start with one seed and the seed will grow and you never know where it will grow. So I think the opportunity is definitely very important to let them have the opportunity to go, you know, from one language to another language to another language. So the research has shown that, you know, if you have one language, it seems a little bit easier when you learn the second language or the third language. And so I think cultivating that is really wonderful.
That's such a good point because we just talked to a language teacher. We were just doing an interview with her, and she was saying that when she was teaching high school Spanish, she found that anybody who spoke another language, it didn't matter what language, it doesn't have to be related to Spanish, it could be Arabic, it could be, you know, Chinese, it could be Japanese or whatever, as long as they spoke another language, it was so much easier for them to learn Spanish. And there's something, just like you said, where it's like wired, where they just, it just makes it easier.
Right. It's a really interesting situation because when my kids were learning, one is still learning Spanish. So when they first started, I'm not a Spanish native speaker, but I decided to just jump in and see what I can do.
Yeah.
And then for them, it's pretty fascinating. They're like, really, Mom? You sure? They were younger. So that was a lot of fun. And then to the point that I have to have somebody to come in to help me. And I think a lot of time parents really need outside help. So the books, Habbi Habbi books, it will be a great start because that's definitely very helpful because with the sound, with the beautiful pronunciation, with different modes, I think you're going to show us later on. And I think that's all very, once again, easy for the parents to get started. And then usually people say it's really hard to get started. to get things started, but here is a way to get it started. And so let's talk about Habbi Habbi, because then you have this idea, you want to make it a reality. I know I heard a story about you actually sat down in Stanford, like a school campus, and talk about this. So can you share that with us?
Sure. So we, Anne-Louise lives in San Francisco, and I'm in the South Bay, and so Stanford is just perfectly in between us. And of course, it's so and we're scrappy entrepreneurs, so we need a place that we can go that is like a good office space. And so Stanford's open, and we were very grateful for having that space, and so we would meet there regularly. And when we first started, kind of like when we started our name, we just said, well, what do we want this brand and identity to be about? So we sat and we talked about all these things around, obviously as a new parent, you think about all these things that you want global to expose, to have them be curious and feel worthy and be a global citizen and be creative and all these things. So we started listing all these things out. And at that time, we were working on a consumer retail concept at the Stanford Shopping Center, and we were curating all these wonderful and toys from around the world and brands that we really identified with. And during this process, we just had a lot of discussions around what we were using at home and what we would love to see in the market. And one of the things that we would love to see was this concept of this tool that made language learning so much more accessible. And so hence the reading wand, but Anne-Louise can elaborate further.
Yeah, I think, we were also seeing, both at home, we talked about our kind of language usage at home, both the need for this kind of tool at home, but also, we were observing thousands of kids and parents come into this little pop-up retail concept that we experimented with. And we had a couple of products in the store that were language related. And when people would come in and were interested in that, they were really deeply interested, right? They were like, I want all of the books that are these Mandarin books that we had. And so we saw it with other families too, that there was a need, I think, for these tools and for things to be fun, right? I mean, you talked about it before about the accessibility. Like, part of the accessibility is that the books that we want are just like fun and play-based. So the kids feel like they're playing, not that they're, doing a workbook or, like you have to force them. It's like anywhere they tap on any page, even the cover, they're going to hear something. They're going to hear words, they're going to hear phrases. They might hear a sound effect. They might have like a hidden surprise. So it's just very engaging and like makes you want to, like, at least for my kids, they'll play with one book and they finish it, and then they want to do another book, because they want like more of that surprise and that fun. So it really kind of keeps them going. And I think our whole philosophy is like exposure, just like exposure. So get them hearing, get them listening, get them repeating. And that's why we wanted to just make it really fun and engaging.
I think this is a really good start. And then I know you had a Kickstarter. And it was phenomenal, because I know you have this is the stat I have, correct me if it's not correct. I believe it's a 98 backers, and then funded 58,000, more than $58,000 of the 10,000 goal. That was very successful. So what did you see and learn from the parents and their support in this crowdfunding, process?
It's very interesting because a lot of times people say, oh, a lot of people have asked us about Kickstarter advice because there are a lot of people very interested in starting their own, whether it's books or flashcards or products, and we've been very happy to talk to people. I think one of the things that we learned is that Anne-Louise touched on this, but that the community, it's a very targeted community. So it's not like, for example, like a shampoo, which is, everybody needs shampoo. But the intensity of love and desire for a product like this is very, very high. So that's, I think, what we found in the Kickstarter. Also, I think that For us, the Kickstarter was a way to launch. It wasn't actually a way to, we believe so passionately about the product that we actually, as you probably saw in our Kickstarter, we actually ordered tons of product before our Kickstarter even launched. So it wasn't whether we met our goal or didn't meet our goal or however many people, signed up. We were like, this is going to happen. Kickstarter is just our way to just say hi to everyone. And so that's how we really treated the Kickstarter. And obviously we've nurtured or tried to nurture and do our best with our community and grow it since. But yeah, no, it was a really crazy experience because Anne-Louise actually had her baby that summer. So I think she had we were filming our Kickstarter video and she we were using her house because they were pretty backgrounds. And then she was like, okay, I'm going to go have my baby because she had a C-section plan. She's like, you guys continue. If you need anything, call me. Well, actually, don't call me. Call my husband because I'm going to be having a baby. And so she had a baby. And so when we had our Kickstarter, we were literally, finally our product arrived and we were packing because we do we're scrappy entrepreneurs. So we do a lot of things ourselves. Anne-Louise, she's incredible. She had this hands-free pump. So I forgot that she was still pumping, except that sometimes she would have to go to the bathroom to change out her pump. But we would have these because all of your Kickstarter orders came before and you obviously want to be timely and try to get them out to people. And so we, it's just she should be pumping while she was packing boxes. And it was just such a crazy first year. It was such a crazy fall. We would go to as many events as we could too, because that was just the way we met parents and people. And so anyway, it was a great experience. It was crazy.
It was totally crazy. And I should also mention too, Hannah, because I was home with a newborn, Hannah was going back and forth. This is when we could still travel. She was going back and forth to China by herself, meeting with our suppliers, making sure everything was just checking all the product. Oh my gosh, it was just, it was a crazy fall, but we were hustling and being scrappy and
yeah. We also, because we knew at that time when we were doing our Kickstarter, I think we had one sample book. And we also wanted to get it in the hands of people who could potentially share it for us. So then it was also that was the time, I think the Hong Kong, because we would fly through Hong Kong and there was all this unrest. And so we weren't sure if we would the airport would shut down. And then we were trying to calculate our luggage limit so we could bring product back. It was very crazy.
Yeah.
Talking
But one thing I will say though about the Kickstarter that we were so pleasantly, but on the Kickstarter, one thing we were pleasantly surprised with is people kind of sharing from there. So it was like Hannah said, it was our way to get out there and to announce ourselves. And of course, many people do Kickstarter as almost like a friends and family, supporting. And of course, we were so grateful for that. But we started to see people that we didn't know, sharing about product maybe they had gotten in the Kickstarter or sharing it with friends, about the Kickstarter. And for us, that felt like this, as the word of mouth, sort of just started to percolate. That was for us just I think so exciting, right? I mean, it's every brand's dream to have people starting to share and talk about it and recommend. And so that's, I think we always goes back to the product. We're what do we create in the product to make people love it enough to want to share it and make a shareable moment? So I think that's something we started to see in the Kickstarter and that we still think about today with product development.
Yeah.
What I see when I, saw your Kickstarter later on, and then I was I see the passion of parents, exactly like what Hannah just talked about, a very targeted audience, because my cousins, they're all your audience because they know what I have now. They're like, what is this? Oh, I need it. And then I say, look at this. So it's really interesting talking about it's like a ripple effect, right? Let a small group of people and they just are falling in love with all the books and the language and they want to share. And then the great story about, Anne-Louise, you were pregnant at that time, and then going back and forth, packing everything. I think it's a very inspiring. Actually, it is like a language learning at home. That's you go through different stages, and then you bring it to reality. Like kids, if you asked me 15 years ago, say, do you think they can be fluent in 2 or 3 languages? I will like, hey, really, I'm trying. But then now when they can go on a summer camp all by themselves in a Chinese speaking community, you're like, wow, they took the bus, really? Wow, pretty good.
Yeah.
You don't see it right there. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon, but we want to make it a beautiful one with the resources. So Habbi Habbi is creating a global minded library and books with the audio support. Usually parents, especially, we're talking about the spectrum of parents, right? There are parents, they speak Mandarin as a native language, or there are parents, they speak Chinese as a heritage language, and there are parents, they don't know any monolingual, grow up monolingual, but they want to introduce another language to the kids. So how do you say this? How do you say that? So the book, the set, and then a wand, the magic wand. I like how you design it as like a magic wand. So maybe you can show us how that works. And I think people can see the magic in Habbi Habbi books.
Sure.
Okay.
So I will pick a couple here, and I'm sure Anne-Louise has some favorites.
I've got a bunch in the background. So you start and we'll go.
Okay, great. So we have here, I'm going to start with this book, which is Animals, Plants, and Places, because so many parents love, their kids love animals, and they start. So when we say it's so easy, welcome, let's start reading. So you just press and hold the button, and we really our goal, like Anne-Louise said, so much thought was behind product. We just really wanted it to make it easy. Press and hold, and then volume up, volume down, and that's really just it. And then you just tap anywhere. That's all you have to do.
Animals, plants, and places. 动物、植物和它们的栖息地。
And so you just press anywhere.
鹿 deer, 森林 forest, 兔子 rabbit.
And they're, animal sounds too, which is fun. And so they're discovering. So there's no, sometimes people think it's reading, so you're tapping to read, but actually you're just tapping to play, because the whole book can come alive, and there's like musical tunes as well.
I love
I touched.
North America. 森林 forest 野花 wild.
So stuff like that. And then it's very intentional, the contents, even though this is like a seemingly simple animals book, you can learn about different habitats. So each spread is not just animals, it's a habitat. So this is the North American rainforest with a globe. Oh, sorry, not rainforest, forest. This is the South American rainforest, African grasslands, the Oceania desert, Antarctic Ocean with all these animals, and like Asia coral reef, and so and then a European pond. So the whole goal, as Emily said, is just basically exposure, tap, and play.
Well, thank you so much. I think play is so important, because playing is actually learning for kids. And the funny thing is, playing is learning not just for little kids, even for big kids too. And a lot of times teaching needs to think in a different direction. And then a lot of times, I think when we talk about play-based learning, it's not just for the little ones, because I think the essence of the playfulness, can really make kids be curious about what's going on. I want to learn about that. And then when I talk about Habbi Habbi books are global minded, because I think it's just not talking about the language. You talk about, we talk about the animals, we talk about where they are from, where they live. And then I know you have a new book coming out, it has something to do with Panda. Miss Panda really loves it. So can you share that with us a little bit?
Yeah, so we have a new book coming out. We're super excited. This one was actually for us the work of probably like 6 books.
So much.
Because our book is not just illustration, every inch is tappable. Obviously, every inch needs, if you're tapping the world, it's a geography book, then every inch has to come alive. So no matter how small the country or the choice of city or what illustrations you're using to bring certain countries and cultures alive, we're so excited about that book, because it's something as adults, not only because of the values global citizenship, but also as adults, you're like, gosh, I want my kids to know geography, but I don't know that well myself. Like all of Central Europe is just so hard sometimes, at least for me. And even, for example, in China is so big, and we didn't put just China as one big mass, we put every single province in there. So, Zhejiang and, Henan and all those things. So then when you tap, people can learn more about the country. And we've made it also a travel oriented book. So there are little airplanes to highlight sort of global cities, which is super fun. So we just love the book so much, and we can't wait to share it with people. Oh,
Let's keep reading.
Well, I think the magic one actually is very magical, because you can actually turn it into, switch to like the target language mode. For example, only Spanish or only English or only Mandarin Chinese, or you can have the bilingual mode as well.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. And while Anne-Louise is grabbing that, I'm going to show just another video, because another book. So this one is called I Love My Body.
I love my body. 我爱我的身体.
And so this one teaches, again, it teaches basic concepts like, eyebrow.
眉毛 eyebrow, 肩膀 shoulder.
But at the same time, it also teaches like affirmational body image concepts, like, clearly sometimes people are sensitive about their hair.
头发 hair.
So we say my hair is pretty. And so again, and it's also very practical, because kids just like tapping all around the body. So even though we've only highlighted 3 words here, you can tap
脖子 neck, 脸颊 cheek, 眉毛 eyebrow, 鼻子 nose.
So you can tap anywhere and it will tell you what it is. And every page, for example, again, affirmational phrase, he has big ears, but he talks about how his ears love music. She has glasses and she talks about how her eyes shine brightly, things like that. So there's like a combination of, sometimes we get the feedback that they're very thoughtful, and we really appreciate that, because we did put a lot of thought in the book, and we want it to be, with the premise being exposure, we want it to be both practical in what it's teaching you, because obviously you should know body parts, but also thoughtful in the messages that it's conveying.
I think it's a very inclusive. I see the not just the wording, talking about the phrases you're talking about, the sentences, but also the drawing, the illustration. It's very inclusive. You see people with different color shade, it's just like the hair you just mentioned. It's very inclusive, and I think it's so beautifully embedded. And then I think you're delivering a very wonderful message to the families who are using the books, no matter where they're from, no matter their background. And then I think the kids will be so proud of their heritage and see them, okay, in those illustrations, okay? Even if it's just something new for them, they will see their friends, they will see themselves in there. Yeah, and Louise, you have something to share with us.
No, I totally agree with that. I think that's, for us, global citizenship, right, is about, it's like about inclusion and representation. And actually one of the books that I grabbed to demonstrate the mode card talks about, as global celebrations, it talks about different holidays and celebrations all over the world. So I'm going to use that. And also my book of family is where we taped to the inside cover our language mode card. So we talked about the mode card before, which allows you to switch between bilingual mode, which obviously has Spanish and English, or Chinese and English, as well as target language only mode.
Target language only mode.
So you just tap, or even
English only mode.
Even English only mode, and you can switch back to bilingual mode. The card is what we first came out with, but in fact our future books are going to have the little buttons right on the inside cover to make it really easy. So I'm just going to demonstrate target language only mode. And I'll show this book of celebrations. This is Spanish. We really love this book so much. It's so fun. So I'll just show a couple of spreads and then I'll show how the target language only works. So this is Thanksgiving. And then we have Lunar New Year, which is really fun because it talks about all the different foods, used or eaten during Lunar New Year and different, traditions, and it tells a little story about it. And even like there's some phrases.
Esto es para ti.
This is like the grandma giving a hongbao, a red envelope to the child, and then
Dale las gracias a la abuela.
the mother says, oh, grandma, thank you. And so as you can see, this is in target language only mode, so it's only speaking Spanish. So even if I were to touch the English,
Nosotros ponemos adornos rojos en la casa.
it will only speak in Spanish. Normally, if I touch the English, it would say English then Spanish, or if I touch the Spanish, it'll say Spanish then English. So just a couple others. We have like Bastille Day in France. We have Dia de Muertos in Mexico, Holi, so in India. So a lot of just celebrations from all over the world. And what's cool is you can also, again, Hannah showed before, but you can tap anywhere.
Apenas tienes color. Déjame cambiar eso.
You'll get
Qué hermoso día.
all sorts of different phrases and words, and then you can easily switch back if you want to go back into bilingual mode. And then you'll go back to having, so for example,
Feliz Festival del Color. Happy Holi.
Telling you, it's magical. So, from bilingual to the target language, basically the parents have they actually have the opportunity to actually just dedicate one language or two languages. I think comprehension is very important. I think sometimes the kids get frustrated because they don't understand. It's just kind of a little baby. When the baby cannot talk before 1 year old, before they learn how to talk, they cry and they get frustrated. Learning a language is the same. When they have the comprehension, when they can have the support of the language they understand, things become easier and then simpler. And then I think the design of Habbi Habbi books, the magical one, I just think they're really, really helpful for little kids. And I said, I wish you were here when my kids were very little. And it's just wonderful. And I think the pronunciation, the printing, the story, everything is a very well crafted. And I think we all know there are many different products, very similar products out there on the market, but Habbi Habbi has the quality, I think is a very high quality, and then everything is so well designed, and I really love it. Yes. And then one more thing, I know actually when you design this, of course for the families, they want to introduce languages to kids, and we're talking about the world citizens, raising young world citizens, the global families, and the books are all very inclusive. And then I think something really touched me when I believe in one story I read about, you received a big order from a hospital. Is that correct? Can you share that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was kind of funny actually. Hannah mentioned we did all these events when we first launched, and one really cold, freezing night in December, we were at a shopping center, and we were about to go home, but we stayed a little extra longer, and this one wonderful woman came up to our table, and we were chatting with her, and she said, I'm part of, she works with a large hospital that has a program for kids in the NICU who are, really premature and have all sorts of challenges, health challenges and developmental challenges. And this program stays with them from ages 0 to 3 and just make sure that they are getting the right care and advancing. And anyway, we had just really briefly talked to her back on that cold December night, and it didn't really you know, it was nice to chat with her, but didn't think too much of it. And meanwhile, you know, months later, she gets back in touch with us and says, you know, we would love to gift your books and wand as the graduation present for the kids that come out of our program. So they get through their program, they're 3 years old. They've made all these strides, and then they get a set of our books and the wand as like their gift to take home. And many of them are heritage Spanish speakers, or some Chinese speakers as well. So the books have been just really powerful for that community, and we stay in touch. I just actually saw this lady back in June, and she told me a story actually that I was like, oh, I'm gonna cry, about how they actually ended up gifting one of the sets to an older sibling of a child in the program. And the older sibling was having some trouble connecting with his baby brother because, you know, baby brother had to have a lot of tests and had a lot of medical challenges. And the older sibling not only loved his own books and wand for himself as a special gift for him, and now I'm gonna like cry, but he started reading to his baby brother using the books and the wand, and it was like this way for them to connect when they hadn't done it before. So I was like, anyway, it just wonderful to be able to have that kind of impact for families and kids.
That's a beautiful story. And then, well, entrepreneurs, you're two female entrepreneurs who are making change in the lives of children and families, and to pull people together to become, you know, global families and then world citizens. So, so your mothers, you're raising bilingual kids, you're entrepreneurs, co-founders of Habbi Habbi. You're making bilingual education at home possible for families around the world. Now, currently with 20 titles at this time. I know it's growing. So what do you see Habbi Habbi 1 year from now?
Oh, it's a good question.
That's so, oh my gosh, I feel like there's so many ways we could bring it. I mean, there's been so many changes, as everyone knows, because nobody could expect COVID and shutdown and all these things. We wanted to expand internationally and set up some distributors abroad, but so much of it is so hard when people can't travel and build new relationships and see. But there are so many things we could do. One of the most popular questions, or most frequently asked question, is, you know, when do we have other languages available, whether it's French or Korean or Hindi, or you know, even just other dialects like Cantonese, or other print versions like traditional. You know, we have so many questions about that. We'd love, like you said, we love that you reference global library, because we also think of ourselves as a global library. We also think of like, there's other types of, you know, product extensions off of our product that we could do. There's so many other titles we'd love to build. So yeah, right now we have 20 in 2 languages. So we have 40 SKUs, but we also have 4 coming out soon in 2 languages, so the 8, and we're just so excited about those 2. Yeah, and you know, always the same principle, which is it needs to be easy to use, it needs to be practical in terms of what it's teaching you, and it needs to be just intentional in the messages, and it needs to be joyful in the experience, because otherwise there's no point when it becomes like a chore. And so we always want to make language learning joyful. So.
And Louise, do you have anything to add to it?
I think that really sums it up. I mean, there's so many things that we're excited about doing, and you know, continuing to just thoughtfully grow and you know, bring more people into our community, and you know, just yeah, like there's so many things we do. I wish there were more hours in the day to do all of it like right away now. But yeah, we're always hustling and always trying to come up with new ideas and continue to bring great things out.
Well, keep working on this project, because it's exciting for everybody who's looking at it. And now this is a question for moms when you are in the role of a mother. So what do I say to yourself about your effort of raising bilingual children 5 years from today?
Ooh. Good question. I hope so. It's actually similar to what I would say about the business, which is Hannah and I always talk about just putting one foot in front of the other and just continuing. Nothing is done overnight. Like, and I think, you know, good things come with a lot of slow and steady, well, it doesn't have to be slow, but a lot of steady, consistent hard work. And I think about that with like language learning. I think my kids aren't going to be fluent overnight. I'm not going to be fluent overnight. But I think if I look back in 5 years and say that we consistently continued to learn and tried and looked for ways to make it fun and engaging, whether it's taking a trip somewhere and to a Spanish speaking country, or whether it's using the books, whether it's school, whether it's whatever it might be, songs like Hannah talked about, and just consistently doing it. I think that's where you see the benefit and you see the reward over time. So I hope that I hope that we're just sticking with it and being thoughtful and being consistent.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like, you mentioned that it's a marathon and it's not a sprint, but we live like in the day and age where, Facebook and billion-dollar companies, get built in like a month. And so I feel like there's this expectation. We've gotten so many comments where people think there's this like one trick that'll like make the business, or like this one product that will make your kids like amazing. And that's not the case. Anne-Louise and I feel so firmly, and she described it so nicely, that it's just like this accumulation of small steps every day. And sometimes people are like, wow, you guys built so many books, or wow, there are only 2 of you. And it's true, like we like work a lot, we like hustle a lot. But I think it's like the consistency of just like, this week, what are we doing? And if you look at the things that we accomplish per week, probably it's like, but actually in the fullness of time and the accumulation of time, because time passes so quickly, there's just a lot you can get done just from doing something consistently every day. So just like Anne-Louise said, I just hope that we grow with our children, and just hopefully like whether it's both through Habbi Habbi, but also just as part of our family culture, just make sure that we continue to make it a priority, and that'll change in the way that it manifests itself, right? It will not necessarily be Netflix cartoons or like Habbi Habbi every single, night, but it will be in different ways, whether Anne-Louise mentioned through travel or through other types of things. And so we just hope that continues to be an emphasis, and that, and of course, all of the learnings and experiences we have, we will continue to infuse into Habbi Habbi as well.
That is beautiful. I think let's celebrate the tiny successes every day. Just tiny successes. It's just like for business and also for learning, not just learning for a language, for everything for our kids. I think their kids are magical. So I think that's what we need to do. I always say, let's celebrate the tiny successes. And then more importantly, you mentioned one word, which is so important: consistency. Learning a language, doing the project you want to do, you want to bring it to the world, and you have done that, and you have been doing it, because there are more things rolling out. It has been such a wonderful conversation with both of you, Anne-Louise and Hannah, the founders of Habbi Habbi. Thank you so much for introducing your wonderful global library with all of our audience and listeners.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. This was so fun, and thank you for the thoughtful questions and
so thoughtful.
lovely. Yeah.
Thank you.